It's 3 o'clock, and lucky folks out there in Del Norte County, you're listening to Conversations with Sam without fail every 3 to 4 on Sunday afternoon. KFUG 101.1 on your FM dial. And it's my pleasure today to have a guest in the studio, the Challenger 4 Supervisor, District Number 4, Ron Phillips. Thank you, Ron, for coming. We'll get to you here in just a minute. I'd like to give a quick shout out to our perennial sponsor, Ocean World, 304 Highway 101 South. Special thanks to Ocean World in Crescent City for underwriting today's broadcast. Since 1964, Ocean World has brought tourists and locals alike face to face with the wonders of the sea. Whether you're marveling at the daredevil exploits of Cora the sea lion, learning about tide pool ecosystems, or petting a live shark, Ocean World offers a unique view into the beauty and mystery of the deep. And don't forget that one-of-a-kind gift shop, great for a vacation souvenir or that last-minute gift for your favorite local. Ocean World, 304 Highway 101 South in Crescent City. Open 7 days a week, or visit them on the web at www.oceanworldonline.com or call 707-464-4900. That's 707-464-4900. Thank you for supporting your local community radio station. Now that we've paid the bills and we're back to talking with Ron about his basically his background and a little bit about why he thinks that if you're new to the county or relatively new to the county, you don't have any contacts in Sacramento that you have the secret handshake with, or you just flat don't know the county because you're too new to understand how things go here. I think it'll be a pleasure this afternoon to find out that Ron might just be a little bit more knowledgeable than most folks at the Triplicate give him credit for. Ron?
Well, thank you for having me on today. It's a beautiful sunny day. I got a little bit of a lawn mowed, but here I am, ready to talk to you.
Well, that's...
and I don't know, is 16 years a newcomer still?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I can remember stumbling around after having been 20 years. If people don't know you personally or you didn't go to high school with them, why, you are a newbie to Del Norte County.
Well, that's probably true.
Yes, absolutely. On this glorious Sunday, a couple of days before the election, I'm kind of wondering if you'll give us a little background as to where you've come from and how you got to where you are now to start the program.
Well, sure. In about 1979, I moved up to Mammoth Lakes, California, bought a restaurant, and was successful in it for 12 years. And when my youngest son left home, I decided to go to college. And before that, I had ran for supervisor in Mono County and lost by 26 votes. And I felt that because I didn't have a college education, people held that against me. So I took one class at the local community college to make sure I could even get through a course. I loved it so much that I decided to move up to Reno and go to school. So I graduated. It was a 5-year, education was a 5-year program at that time. So I graduated and with a BA in education, and then went on and had obtained a master's in creative arts and education. And from that point, I started working on a doctorate in administration, and I just said, well, wait a minute, I'm getting too old for this. So I just dropped out after one semester, and we settled with my brother on our family's estate and had some money, and we wanted to move out of Reno. It had grown so much in late 90s, early 2000s, and they were building like 1,000 homes a week, and it just wasn't enjoyable to live there anymore. Plus, we had a couple of snow years. And after living in Mammoth for 12 years and all the snow, we were ready to go someplace where it wasn't a lot of snow. So we looked all over the country like a lot of people do, back east and, in the south. And my wife found an ad on the internet and for a house here that was within our price range. And we got a hold of Investment Realty and said, hey, or I did, told them, I said, I want to look at this house. So put a down payment on it and, let me come over and look at it. And we come over and bought it. And for 2 years, we went back and forth to, while my wife finished or retired from the state of Nevada. And then we moved over here in '05. And, somewhere in that area, we added on 1,000 square feet to our house. So, and we had her mother-in-law, my mother-in-law, her mother living with us, and so we added 2 master bedrooms. And then when she died, we've had the grandkids living there and the great-grandkids, and now we have our son and his wife living with us. So we've enjoyed it. 2007, I volunteered to help out with the tall ships. That was the first year it came here. And so I guess I did such a good job. Our Rural Human Services hired me on a part-time basis, and I've been with them now for almost 11 years. So I run the food and family division of it. We serve about 700 people a month with the federal commodities program. We're over 225 participants with the senior box program, and we have about 35 people that come in once every 2 months to get an emergency food box. Now, if that's not enough, I also run Santa's Workshop at Christmas time, and we service about 1,400 children every year that are in need of a little help at Christmas. And then, of course, yesterday we started out the farmers market. This will be my 10th year running the farmers market at the fairgrounds. So I think I've done a lot. And then, of course, I've been a harbor commissioner now for almost 11 years at our local harbor.
So you've got quite a resume, actually, for most of us that don't know you very well.
I've, a lot of people don't think that we running me, have the knowledge of having contacts with state and federal government. And, we've gone through 3 tsunamis since I've been on the board. Two disasters. Of course, 2011 destroyed everything. So I can't tell you how many people I've met that are either in some form of a government job, state government job, or our state legislators. So I'm probably, of the 3 of us challenging Jerry, have the most experience and the most contacts with federal and state government elected officials.
Which very likely will play a fairly important part if you're going to get the kind of things that we need here locally with regards to help from the state and the federal government.
Right, and I have a good rapport with Senator McGuire. Representative Woods has not come to Delaware County as much as Senator McGuire, so I've had a better rapport with Senator McGuire. For a number of years, probably the first 3, when he'd come to town and see me, he'd always tell people, I had him on speed dial, but if I did, I never used it. I had a flip-top phone, so that's not exactly speed dial.
No, I wouldn't say it.
But I've worked with, Mike Thompson when he was our congressional representative. We met with him, and when we were having problems getting our dredging in the harbor done, and we sat down and had lunch, and the whole commission, and he promised us when he left he'd get it done and the dredging done, and he did. I mean, I thought, we had a good working relationship with him there. So, and of course, anything we do down at the harbor, we have to go and have coastal to approve it. So, and we've had good rapport with them, and that brings up a topic that I favor, and that's the Prop A, which is term limits. And some of the people, and I've heard Jerry say this too, that it takes a long time to get a rapport with them and of the different agency people, but our elected officials in California have term limits of 12 years. And so you're only going to, if you came in at the same time with them, you might have the availability of them for 12 years. But if you're, let's say now, Mike McGuire's running on his second term, in 8 years he would be gone. And the same thing happens with a lot of the department heads in the state. They either get moved up or they retire. So you're constantly meeting new people and working with new people. So I don't see where term limits is going to affect anybody new.
What you're saying then, basically, it's a false argument.
It is very much a false argument, and unfortunately, it's an argument pushed by the Democrats.
Well, I mean, it's an argument that I've heard from all points of view for people that they get a person in that they're comfortable with and they don't want to see them leave, because it's very difficult for people to deal with the new person, so to speak. Sometimes, I mean, it takes a certain personality to kind of join in with your kind of thinking after you've been so used to seeing the same face over and over and over again.
Well, and I think that's probably what's part of our government problem nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that people get comfortable in the position, and they don't.
Well, they don't
want to make a change.
They stop working for the people.
Yeah,
that's basically what it boils down to.
Right.
Because when Jerry first ran, I mean, I'll be real honest with you. I voted for him because he seemed like a better choice than the person that he was replacing. The person that he was replacing just seemed to have run out of gas, so to speak. But that quickly became Jerry's problem, that he just was more comfortable sitting on his hands, sitting on the sidelines, letting other people carry the water. And he would raise his hand and vote when it was the appropriate time, but I didn't get the feeling that he was really very, very sincerely engaged in any of the issues that were brought up. He was very often uncomfortable with the information that he had to deal with, had a difficult time processing it, had a difficult time, coming to a position as a result of what he had for information. Asked some of the dumbest questions I've ever heard out of a representative at times in board meetings. And then when he would get called on his just lack of preparation, he would devolve into kind of a whiny little child. And
well, he's still doing that, Sam.
Well, absolutely.
And now Martha and Dave are gone.
Right.
But now you have Chris Howard. And I like Chris, but I feel he's telling Jerry what to say. And he even made the statement at one of I think it was when we were at the candidates night for the realtors. He made the statement something along the lines that, well, I'm glad, Chris is saying everything because I don't have to say it then, and so But other night we were at a candidates night, and it was just Dave Mason, myself, and Jerry, and you could see he just kind of stumbled through things, didn't want to answer really the questions, and then when he did, he went off on some thing about how long he's lived here and grew up here and that kind of thing. So
how he favors children's programs and supporting
we all
youth.
do. I went to school to be a teacher and taught for 5 years, and
it's a throwaway statement,
right?
I mean, it's totally meaningless.
Well, a lot of it is we, and as a supervisor, I would think some of it you need to be the one leading the charge instead of the one bringing up the tail.
What leadership out of a representative for the county?
Yeah.
Before we move on, I'd like to do a quick station break. This is KFUG 101.1 on your FM dial. You're listening to Conversations with Sam every 3 to 4 on Sunday afternoons without fail. Today we've got Mr. Ron Phillips on the line, a challenger for the District 4 Supervisor's seat. And we've had quite an engaging conversation thus far. But before we move on, I'd like to jump back to a quick question on his perception from being a Harbor Board member. California has basically put the stake in the heart of most resource-based industries in the state over the last, probably 30 years, logging, fishing, mining. How viable do you think the harbor is going to be if the continued overregulation, gear restrictions, area restrictions, curb commercial fishing, and the shrinking of the commercial fishing fleet along the California coast? How is that going to affect the viability of the harbor to stay, basically functional financially when a substantial amount of their income may, in the near future, so to speak, evaporate, or at least reduce to the point where, it's a marginal source of income? Well,
can I answer now?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think what we're trying to do is diversify.
Right.
And so we've got a program going now and looking for funding where we're going to be putting in campgrounds. We just took over the old RV park, Anchor on Anchor Way. And so we're cleaning that up, and we've got plans to remodel it. We're going to follow in the example of what the city did down at the S-curve with their park down there. We're trying to put some money in the bank, and so that when we do go and make a remodeling of that, we'll have money. But also we're looking at putting in yurts and tiny homes down there to rent out. We've got the old England Marine building. We're trying to find somebody to rent, a viable business. And we just, our harbor master just met with some folks who are in the hotel business, and they pretty much told us that unless we built a hotel ourselves, we would not ever find anybody because the profit's just not there. So I kind of challenged that because I think it is there. People want to stay close to the water. That's why we have all them hotels built down there now, is they want a view of the harbor. So, but you're right. I mean, over the state has just about depleted fishing. Right now what we have is crab fishing. And that's very good, every year. Well, I shouldn't say every year, but in most years it's a good income for the fishermen, and we get a little bit of poundage fees out of that. But we have to diversify and make things. We're looking at putting in the tsunami center that would have be tall enough that if we had a near shore, that we could get people upstairs out of the current or out of the waves, whatever, and be able to at least protect them until we could get relief in. So, but it's a long-term thing. It's a costly thing, And one of the reasons we hired Charlie Helms was because he had a big background in not just running harbors, but also in financial institutions. And so he's making those contacts. So we've got our fingers crossed that here one of these days somebody's going to come along and, support us either through a grant, which would be ideal because we don't have to pay that back, but it could be a loan or just a outright want to build and put their name on it.
Yeah, excellent. Because my perception, having lived here for since 1975 and having contact in the community since criminy 1952 when I was a child, I would like to see Del Norte succeed, grow, be a prosperous place. But it seems that in the past 10 or 15 years, when boards and commissions run into problems, particularly financial problems, their go-to solution is to go to the voters or go to the Board of Supervisors and ask for this little bitty, just a little bitty token tax on the local population. And when you start adding them up, the school districts, their bond, which taxes in essence the property owners. You look at the harbor, not the harbor, the fairgrounds who've hit the sales tax. Of course, the library wanted to hit the sales tax previously, but unfortunately, the fair is more important than having a library, apparently. And now the harbor is trying to take a little chip out of the money that previously was used to support the tourist industry.
Well, let me correct you, because we're not taking a chip out of what they got. We're adding.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but ordinarily that's been the source for the tourist. To try to instill a more viable tourist industry here in Del Norte County.
But they'll still get their 8%.
I understand that. I'm not arguing with you.
And what we're looking for is the 2% to pay off the loan that we had to borrow, because when we rebuilt the harbor at $65 million, we had to come up with 6.25%. And so we had to take a loan to be able to do that. And so that's all we're doing is trying to, because they won't forgive the loan. We've tried that avenue. And it's $65,000 a year that we have to make a payment to pay off this $5 million that we had to borrow. And so, we look at that going strictly to the loan payment, whatever that amount would be on the 2% that we're adding would go directly to pay off the $5 million loan.
If you look at it from the standpoint of the fact that the commercial fishing industry is declining, and you've just pumped $65 million into a harbor that may in a few years be virtually empty, how sound is that going to appear?
Yeah, I don't know that it'll be virtually empty, because crabbing so far, other than the amount of gear you can put out, has not been reduced. So we're still doing over 1 million pounds a year in crabs brought into the harbor and across our docks. So I don't think that salmon, it may come back. I don't know. The drag fishing is not good. There's and then here a few years ago they put restrictions on where you could fish. They held a lot of meetings, and then went on and did whatever they wanted to do.
So you're optimistic that there will be a viable use for the harbor, in the future.
Yeah, I don't think that's going away. The problem I see with it is that the average age of a fisherman anymore is getting up near 65. And you don't see a lot of young people coming into fishing, especially commercial fishing, anywhere up and down the California coast. not just here. So to me, that's more of a detriment than the regulations sometimes.
Well, you understand, of course, that crab fishing is a relatively short period of time in a calendar year.
Right.
And even though you get a million plus pounds across the dock in that time period, it doesn't say much for the entire rest of the year.
Well, there is some other fishing still
Income.
out there.
Right,
Tuna's
yeah.
out there. I mean, they do well with tuna most of the time. It's up and down also, depending on the waters. And with if this is a climate change really and truly, we've had a couple years where we had the water was too warm to be able to process the crabs, especially.
Well, I mean, I looked at the landings in Crescent City Harbor, and the peak years were way back in the 80s, the late 80s. Since then, there's been a steady decline in landings. Also, just the number of commercial fishing boats has steadily declined.
Right.
Through a variety of primarily California programs where they're buying the licenses back, and the boats really lose their purpose. But, I don't want to go into this any more than that. What I want to do is move on to other things that I'm sure the voters are going to be interested in. Primarily, what can we do with regards to the economy? How we're going to do something about last chance grade before the turn of the century. Whether or not we can combine a series of groups here in the county, the Board of Supervisors, the school districts, say, and the fairgrounds and the harbor and even the airport to take care of the fact that a lot of our programs are really underutilized, that we seem like we could get a lot more out of it. You've pretty much outlined what the harbor's trying to do to diversify, to become more cognizant of the fact that they need to move on to other different kinds of venues and activities in order to finance what is currently going on down at the harbor. But the other issue that we have is we've got a lot of deferred maintenance scattered around the country, around the county. That is the school district saying that they've got millions of dollars of unfunded deferred maintenance. The harbor just came out and said they've got a bit. I'm sure that the fairgrounds has got a significant amount. The fairgrounds, which seems to me is an area where if some money from this, for instance, this tax money that's coming in could be used to kind of clean the fairgrounds up, and they could be a bit more than just a venue for the fairgrounds, that there would be an opportunity there. What do you see as opportunity in Del Norte County?
Well, first of all, we need to get and I'm hoping that the signs are that with Trump's proposals and stuff, that the economy is coming back. We have a couple, as I was driving here, there's a couple new businesses getting ready to open down here on 101. And so that's a good sign. I do see a few houses being built around town, a couple apartment houses being built. So I'm hoping that this boost in the economy holds for a while, and we do see a change. But I don't think we're out there publicizing ourselves. We're trying to get the next visitor. But the Tri-Agency, when I first went on it, had a director that would go out and actually sell the county and try to bring in business, And so I think we've not done that for a while. The county has not put a person or a group together to actually, we have the economic development group, and I understand they might be making some changes, but we're just not getting businesses in here. So one of the things that I've said before is to entice people who want to come into town and open up a business by giving them a tax break for 5 years or 3 years. And, maybe they would pay 50% of the amount of tax with the stipulation that if they took an old building and they would clean it up and they would hire people at a $15 rate or whatever the commission decided they wanted to do, and entice people to come in and start businesses. Something more than something that's going to be a family business or hire 2 or 3 people. Now, I understand the new Tractor Supply is going to hire about 10 people, and that might be just a start to see how much business they're going to have. But, there's one good example of the bad. I think there is a downside to that, though, is that how is it going to affect the 2 places that you can go get chicken food and hay for your horse, and how's it going to affect them? And that's what's always bad when you get a box store in. I would have much rather seen a private industry come in and do the same thing.
That seems to be the way business is going nowadays, though. It seems that large box stores come in, they're relatively anonymous. They try to make sure that the community is appreciative of their operation by donations and this sort of thing. But it seems like the money doesn't necessarily stay in the county.
Well, it doesn't on any kind of box store. I think we used to use the idea that if it was generated locally on a local business, it would turn over about 5 times before it ever left the community. Mm-hmm. And that would be through whoever you were buying from, having to buy from outside of the area. And so, and it's probably still true today. I mean, that's pretty much a good way to figure it out.
I mean, box stores are certainly not going to be able to cover everything. And there are going to be probably opportunities for niche stores, but with our population at, say, I think we're around 24,000 with another, they include the 2,300 that are out at the prison. We're up to about 26,300. With that limit on the population, unless we can attract business from out of the area, it's going to be real hard for small businesses to make a viable profit. I have a number of friends that have small stores in downtown Crescent City, and it's a kind of a hand-and-mouth affair. And a lot of it is because we just don't have the numbers here. And we seem to be shrinking over the last few years in terms of overall numbers.
Well, we have lost a lot of businesses, and we've had some people come in and, open back up or change the venue of whatever was in there before. But you're right. I think one of the problems is we're just so close to the border where we can go, and if you're buying a major product, you're not paying sales tax on it. So, and I know people out there that are really pushing to, keep business in town and buy in town, and but for you and I, try to go and buy a pair of pants somewhere something besides a pair of blue jeans. Uh-huh. I was at Walmart today, and they have one pair of pants. It's not a blue jean or a work pant, and there was only 2 colors of that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it would be nice to have a haberdashery, right? I mean,
or someplace where you could get a pair of
dress pants.
I had to go somewhere. I think it was to a funeral, and had to have a respectable pair of slacks. Mm-hmm. And I spent the best part of 2 days hunting around in Crescent City for something other than slacks.
Yeah.
And,
well, you're right. I mean,
I couldn't even come up with something that was respectable out of Brookings. I mean, I ended up having to go up there, which even though I live halfway up there, I live out towards Fort Dick. It seemed like just a crying shame that there wasn't someplace else in town that. When I first came to town, there was actually a store in town that sold evening wear and upscale clothing for people that went to nice places and required nice clothes. Now that just doesn't seem to be anything that's almost in existence.
Well, when I first started looking for a job many years ago, if you didn't go in with a shirt and tie and almost a suit on, you didn't get the job. And And nowadays I see people coming in applying for jobs, and they've got the holy blue jeans and the tennis shoes and the hat turned backwards, and
yeah,
whatever else. I mean,
it's a very different society that we live in
society,
nowadays. With that, I'd like to take another quick break to make sure everybody knows what they're listening to. This is KFUG 101.1 on your FM dial. And you've been listening to Conversations with Sam every 3 to 4 on Sunday. And today we have the pleasure of Mr. Ron Phillips in the studio to talk about his vision for Del Norte County in the future. But first, we are talking a little bit of the nature of what is possible for Del Norte County with respect to the economy. And for instance, the big push to deal with blight, to deal with homelessness, to deal with the bypass of last chance grade. How does that play into an improving economy here in Del Norte County? Can you give us your thoughts on that, Ron?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about homelessness. It's a nationwide problem. It's not just here in Del Norte County or Humboldt County. I was down in Oakland around the first of the year, a little after, and their main park right downtown was just full of homeless people that were camped in that park. You get down around Sacramento, every bridge that you look under has got homeless everywhere. And so a lot of that has to do with the opioid problem or some other drug. A lot of it has to do with alcoholism, and then a lot of it is just the fact that people can't find a place to live that's affordable. I have a grandson here in town that's paying somewhere around $1,200 a month, for a house for him and his family. And, he's got a good job. His girlfriend's got a good job. But every dime goes into supporting a house. And so, as we talked a little bit earlier, there are some places being built. It looks like maybe they're apartments. Over on Northcrest, they're redoing some, probably look like maybe at one time were some cabins for people that worked in the forest, just small cabins. They're redoing them. But when it comes to true homelessness, there is a real mental problem there, and we don't have, in my opinion, a great mental network here. It's and I have somebody that's working for me now was sent over by mental health, and he's doing a great job. And I think a lot of it is just people, if they get the opportunity to shine and you give them the respect, they'll shine. And so hopefully whatever his problem is, it'll work out and he'll be able to get a job. But it's one of these things that we have to work with our senator, and he's got a project that he's trying to get funding for where we could put in some permanent housings. I would much prefer it be temporary housing so that people could get in, because they're going to have to be reschooled. If they've been out living in the woods out here and for any length of time, I think there's a respectability that they've lost, and that needs to come back. And so they have to be, in my opinion, they would have to be well managed, if you want to call it that. And there would be a time when they would have to, whatever money they were getting in, would have to save part of it so that they could eventually have enough money to put either a down payment on a house, or be able to have enough money to pay the first and last to get into, a house somewhere here in town. So, but there's some people that are homeless that you would never get out of the forest out here. That's just, they've become accustomed to that, and that's their way of life. And then that would be like you and I all of a sudden having to go live out here, and we'd do everything we could not to do it, but
Do you think that's a significant number here in Del Norte County, or do you think that a fair amount of the people that are homeless would actually, could be, say, reprogrammed and placed in a home and actually become responsible, wage-earning people?
I really look at it at probably about 60% no, would never be able to move in and be productive, with another 30% that might. So
I mean, I'm closing on 70 years old, and I've never seen the like. I mean, when I was a young person, and my grandfather used to talk about the 30s during the Great Depression, and the 20s, for that matter, the late 20s, early 30s, when the country was in turmoil and the economy was a disaster. It seemed to me like, even though there were a lot of people that were hobos or homeless, or however you want to describe it, there was always this something that was instilled in them that they wanted to, depart from that kind of lifestyle and become, responsible citizens again. When what you're saying now is virtually 60% of that number that we're seeing probably doesn't have that spirit anymore.
I think they've lost it. I really do, and I don't know why. Whether it was drug addiction or if it was, I've talked to a number of people, because of course we give them food. Okay, and so you strike up a conversation, but through some of our work programs, we've had people come in that are paying off a fine. They don't have the money, so they work it off in community service. And you find a great number of them that have had some kind of abuse in their family growing up. And that's the disturbing point. It used to be that when you and I were growing up, you started out, you had a family, probably lived with grandma or your parents, and there was that family connect. I don't see the family connect anymore.
You think the ultimate issue might be the family to begin with? Right.
I think we've lost our way when it comes to the family connect.
Is that, part of our history here in the United States, say the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, where the society became more permissive and we just evolved into that kind of...
I think we just quit caring about it.
Quit caring.
Yeah. And I don't know that it was the 60s, but I would say...
This is an example.
Yeah. Even in the 60s, we didn't have the homeless population like we have now.
Do you see a solution for us?
Here in Del Norte County?
Right. Do you see a solution for that?
I think it would be a real challenge, but I think what we have to do is really start looking at what the problems are. Now, we take a survey every year of the homeless people on a certain day. It's called Time and Place. And this year we showed a little bit increase in the number of homeless, and I don't think that was really an increase in the number of people. I think it was an increase in the number of people who would come in and be counted, knowing that they weren't going to be harassed in some way. There was for a couple years that we did it, there was a real fear from people that were buried deep in the forest out here that just didn't trust anybody, and they didn't trust government. And I think knowing this program, they've slowly, and then what Mike Justice is doing over at Our Daily Bread and the things that are happening over there, I think people are becoming a little more comfortable in being identified, not by name, but by race or whatever.
Mr. Justice is saying we're dealing with somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 plus people in the county that are either conditionally homeless or permanently homeless or, couch surfing, I guess is the best way to describe it. Do you think that's an accurate reflection of where we're at?
I personally think it's a little high. Mm-hmm. I would say it's probably closer to 300, but he's dealing with people more on a daily basis than I do. And so I deal with them more on a monthly basis, and I know their faces and that type of thing. So, but I don't count heads as they go through or anything like that. So but doing the surveys, I just know that there are a number of people out there. At one time, there was 5 of us at RHS that were veterans, and so we tried to we were worried about veterans who were living out that, had, for whatever reason, dropped off of the society or out of society. And so when we started looking, there was a lot that would say they were veterans, but when you went to, ask them for DD 214 or some proof that they were, all of a sudden they really weren't veterans. And then we found a lot that were veterans who had, for whatever reason, gotten a dishonorable discharge or been let go for other reasons and couldn't qualify for any type of veteran benefits. So we found a number of them also. But it's got to be probably, I don't want to even say a 3-prong approach. It's got to be more like a 5-prong approach, where we have to try to find people who, for whatever reason, haven't been out there for more than 6 months, maybe 8 months. Those are kind of people that probably have lost their job, maybe they're lost, for whatever reason, contact with their families for a while, and I hope we still have it going. We had a program where the sheriff would pick them up or give them the opportunity to call their family and see about...
That just recently was exercised behind Safeway, where they went in and they contacted all the homeless behind Safeway prior to cleaning up that area back there, and they made the offer to basically, do you have some family member that you can go to? Do you have a phone number? Can we call them and confirm that it's okay for us to send you there? And then we provide the wherewithal for you to get there. And apparently it was very successful. Of course, there was a lot of typical whining in the triplicate about how we were, in effect, taking what little they had from them and leaving them absolutely penniless and blanketless and tentless. But the program pretty clearly was exercised with the intent of, number one, having those folks move to a place where they were secure and taken care of. Number two, being able to clean up that area, because it's my understanding that the creek that runs through that area has become an absolute disaster when it comes to particulate matter of the odoriferous kind.
Well, yeah. Actually, when I first went to work for RHS in 2007, we had a program where we were able to hire, I think we had about 15 people at that time that would go out and clean up places. And we actually worked behind RHS there for about 3 weeks, cutting the berry vines down. And you can't believe what we found back in there, and hauled off, truckload after truckload of trash. But that here again, that brings out the problem. They have no respect. First of all, they just drop it where it's at. A guy came into our place the other day and he wanted food. He said, "I need food." So I said, "Well, do you have cooking facilities?" "No, don't have any." So we got a bunch of stuff that he could eat, without having to cook it. And so he sat there on the curb and ate everything that he wanted to eat and just left his papers right there. The bag, the wrapping, everything. Didn't pick anything up and even bring it over to us and ask if we had a trash can he could throw it in. He just got up and walked away, leaving it there. And so this is one of the problems, is one of the prongs that we've got to work on, is getting people to have respectability of where they live and cleaning it up. And how many of those people, when Roger goes out to do a cleaning, actually jumps in and helps out?
None.
Probably none.
None, yeah.
Recently
at the board meeting, we had a report by, I believe it was the county health officer, and he was talking about opioids. And during the course of that conversation, I asked the question of him, how much of a relationship is there between opioid dependency and homelessness? And his response was probably a significant amount. If we were to correct the opioid problem, which I don't know how easy that is to deal with, how much of an effect do you think that it would have on cleaning up the homeless problem here in Delaware County?
Well, if you're going to do that, you've got to have some place for them to be.
Absolutely.
And so that requires, one of the things that we looked at when we had this committee going was going down where the old health department used to be, down there behind CAL FIRE. That area down there, and it had some classrooms down there and different things. And that would be an ideal place to put in a lot of either small cabins or something where you had control and was able to help the people out, have mental health there, have classes there, and all of that. But you have to have some place where you can control what they do, and then also build that respectability back. And that could be done through, one of the things that's proven is having farming. Farming is a great tool to have people come in, learn to have some reliability or respectability. And so we were thinking that would be a great place to have a small farm. People could live there on the property, do farming, and then take it to the market and sell it, and put that money back in and so forth. So, but without having, you can't just say, okay, we're going to give you a fix and send them back out to the woods, because that's not going to work.
How realistic is something like that to set up?
Well, there's a number of places around the country. One of them that I first ever heard about was down in almost to San Diego and Escondido, down in that area, but it was more designed for veterans who were coming back. And so they had a farm down there that they would, the government, they were using their government checks, and the government would pay them to go and live at this farm or whatever, and people would do farming, and then they had counselors that would come in and work with them on whatever problem they might have, and even to the point where they brought in business people that would talk to them about getting into business, give them a business background, and then they hooked in with one of the local junior colleges down there, and they had programs where people would go, and if they stayed in the program long enough, would actually have a degree in agriculture when they walked away. So, I mean, that could be done here on a small basis. We've got a junior college here, and so, and that's one of the things we need is a good farming. We have one real farmer that has more than, a couple acres. You have one right next door to you that comes to the market, and they've only got whatever lot size this is here, half acre, and they come and make, oh, excuse me.
That's all right.
And they have, they come to the market for 22 weeks. And raise enough to come and make a little bit of money at the farmer's market. So it can be done. It's just we have to have a support system to start it, but we have to have a lot of agencies working together on it. It's not just mental health. It's not just the college. You talked briefly at the beginning of how we could have all of these different services put together, the harbor, the city, and the county, and mental health, and all of that.
Well, it seems like the college could be involved, the school district could be involved, the fairgrounds could be involved.
All of that can be involved.
And you know, that it wouldn't require a great deal of financial investment on their part. It wouldn't require a lot of staff time on their part if everybody put in a little bit. I mean, the Department of Social Services, who, you know, they have a fair amount of contact with homeless people, with people that are down on their luck. And it would seem like at this point they spend an awful lot of energy and time on things that quite frankly don't work. And it would be of great benefit to the county if, from the standpoint of the Board of Supervisors, I mean, I know they can't dictate like some, you know, old style emperor, but they can have a great deal of influence on getting these various agencies to cooperate and focus in on, you know, I mean, if you dealt with, at least to some degree, the opioid problem in combination with homelessness, it seemed like you could solve some of your blight problem as well. That you know, be a win-win-win. But I don't see anything coming out of the current Board of Supervisors on particularly from the District 3, 4, and 2 that is inclined to provide any of this kind of cooperative effort. They seem to be waiting in the wings, so to speak, for someone else to do it for them.
Well, you know, when I first went on the Harbor Commission, I was appointed to the IGRC. When that was a meeting where all of the state and federal and different government, the Park Service, would meet once a month. You know, there would be 2 representatives from each. And we would sit there and we would talk about what we were going to do or what we were doing. And each department would, you know, let everybody else know what they were doing. And we could go back to doing that. It's been, right now, they say we meet once every 3 months, and half the time that even meeting gets canceled. So I think we need 2 supervisors that are dedicated to kind of getting that restarted, and then get 2 councilmen. We've got 4 new council members that, you know, need to be getting involved in what's going on in the city, and we need to change District 4. I don't know that District 3 will change, but we need to change District 4. For 12 years, Jerry's been there, hasn't done anything that he can speak of. Every time he talks, it's we. I don't know who the we is, but, you know, we need a supervisor that's willing to get along with everybody. And that's one of the reasons I chose to run.
We had the challenger here on this program, and I have to say that his offering was significantly more impressive than anything that Chris Howard has had to offer. I mean, granted, he's only been in the county for a relatively short period of time again, but, you know, he worked in Sacramento for 30 some odd years, and the man is incredibly knowledgeable and listens well and has a lot of really positive thoughts about the county. This is what I like about the you know, the challenge to the two county supervisors that are currently in office, that there's a tremendous amount of optimism from all of the challengers that are throwing their hat into the ring, so to speak, and the response you get out of out of Chris Howard and Jerry Hemingston is, well, we have all of these relationships, these secret relationships we've got established down in Sacramento, and we support our local youth, and beyond that, it's a big fat zero, because, well, I mean, I've seen them in office for Jerry for 12 years and Chris for the last 3, and it still is a big fat zero.
Well, look at their ads in the paper. You know, if you look at the people that are supporting them, I would venture to say there's probably not 15 on that list that actually live in District 4. And that is the Alexanders. They live there, and a few others. But a big portion of them I know that don't even live in District 4. And so I don't like the term good old boy, but that's what it is. I keep trying to find another way. And if you look at Chris Howard, and the number of people that are supporting him, it's people that want to run the county. I'll just say it that way. They're the ones who, and they're happy with what they've got. And you're right. I saw Jake. Jake is the one that brought it out on YouTube about what was going to happen with the tribe and what they were trying to do. Now I saw in the paper Huffman has backed away from that now. Well, would that have got backed away from if Jake hadn't come out and kind of brought it to everybody's attention?
Absolutely not.
Probably not. Because none of the rest of us would have known about it. Because the two supervisors that sat on that 2x2 with the Talawa, Dene, they didn't report out.
Hold that thought. We're at the top of the hour. It's 4 o'clock, but never fear, we're not done today. We're going to cruise into the second hour here on KFUG 101.1. Conversations with Sam every 3 to 4 on your Sunday afternoon, but we're going to have a bonus hour talking to Mr. Ron Phillips, challenger for District 4, the seat on the Board of Supervisors, and we are really getting into some interesting territory here now. In any event, take it away, Ron.
Okay, well, we were talking about the good old boy syndrome and what was happening. And so I think you brought it up earlier. People get comfortable with their supervisor, and they really don't understand unless something comes up like, the marijuana issue or some of those propositions. People really, they just go on their day-by-day routines and don't think about what's happening in the county. Now, we all know that Last Chance Grade has been around for 40 years,
More than that.
Yeah, well, 40 that I know of.
Yeah, as an issue.
Yeah. And, we see a lot of construction going on. I hope that holds for a while until we can do an environmental study. I'm encouraged by the fact that our senator has said he has some money to start the process of doing the environmental work that has to be done. And you've been in California long enough to know that could take 10 years.
No, it takes far longer than 10 years.
Well,
And in Del Norte County, it's probably 3 times that long.
I lived in Mammoth when we had a volcano scare there. And, we had earthquakes just about every 10 minutes they went and they measured, and the magma was, like just 6 miles down, and there was a threat that it was going to blow up any day. And at that time, we only had one way in and one way out, and we'd get 25,000 people there in wintertime. And I think when they decided they needed to get another road out of town, within a year, we had a 2-lane highway out of town. So.
But how does that happen in Mammoth Lakes, and it can't happen here?
Well, we weren't cutting down a redwood. It was just a pine tree that we were going to cut down. So, but why does it take so long for anything to get done?
I mean, they cannot even figure out between the 6 or 7 different alternative routes that they have. They can't even narrow it down to 1 or 2. And how does that work?
Well, again, I just read in the paper we have a new director for Caltrans, and she was up. I think it was she was up here, and maybe working with somebody new, we can get that narrowed down. I know I think Roger Gitlin sat on that for a while. I never had the opportunity to go and actually see the different routes. But I think, let's just face it, the greasy wheel, gets the action.
Well, I mean...
And so we need to be the squeaky wheel. We just can't sit back. And I don't mean being a belligerent or whatever. You can do it in a nice way. You just have to keep pressure on people, keep inviting them up here, whatever it takes to get them up here and understand, the magnitude of what would happen. At the harbor, we've wrote letters, under all of the commissioners have, sent off letters to Caltrans and everybody else trying to encourage them, because it would affect us in the fishing industry, getting things hauled out of here. I have a son that drives a school bus, and that's not his route today, but it could be, and they run 2 school buses down there a day and 2 back. And so I think those kinds of issues, somebody needs to be on that board that'll take that under and, work with everybody else. Right now we have a divided board. You've brought it up, so I'm not saying anything that's not true.
15 years ago, I met and talked with the retired chief engineer of Caltrans for District Number 1, which is in effect Del Norte County. Mm-hmm. He established the most economical and most effective route to bypass bypass last chance grade in 1973.
Yeah. And we're still trying to get it done.
At that point, it would have been, they could have done it for under $10 million. Now we're talking about billions.
10 million to do the environmental study.
Right. And so, I just, this continuous referral to 2031 and 2039 seems hugely over-optimistic at this point. And to me, it would seem like in order to get anything done about last chance grade, is the current roadway is going to have to fail in a rather significant and spectacular fashion. Otherwise, the state is continually going to pour in money, probably in excess of the total cost of bypassing the grade, before anything is ever seriously considered, let alone begun.
Well, and it won't do with the present supervisor in District 4.
No.
He's not out there, beating the drum or challenging or whatever you want to call it. We have to have somebody in that district that'll work with everybody on that board. I'm not talking about just one side or the other. I'm talking about working with everybody on the board. I've worked with 9 different people as commissioners at the harbor. That's 9 different personalities, and we've always managed to get everything done. So it can be done in a respectful way, and sometimes you get your feelings hurt because what you wanted didn't get done, but you let it go because you got another fight coming in you the next day.
What about the recent notion that if last chance grade were to fail, that Humboldt County would also suffer pretty dramatically, particularly from an economic standpoint? How easy would it be to get Humboldt involved in pressing for?
Well, I think we have had Humboldt at different times, but I don't think they see it as an emergency as much we see it, because people could, if they wanted to come up the coast and visit, they could go over 299 and, that way. So I don't think they're looking at it as much of an economic.
I mean, the report was, literally, billions of dollars of economy that would flounder if last chance grade would be destroyed, and Humboldt would it seemed like they featured pretty prominently in the loss column there.
Well, we counted up one day the number of just trucks that go across there. There's about 200 trucks that go up, and I'm not talking about little bobtail trucks like
No,
that.
I understand.
I'm talking about semis. They go up and down that road every day, over 200. I mean, that's 200 trucks carrying either food here and going back empty, or carrying food, something out of here or passing through. That just alone would be an economic, drop.
Disaster.
I don't know. Can you tell me when the last time the supervisors ever met with the supervisors? And
Not to my knowledge. At least, full board to full board.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Full board. They may meet with on a 2x2 or something like that. But I'm talking about the full board getting together from both places and meeting and saying, look, how can we work together?
I mean, to a certain degree, I don't know how much Curry County would be affected by that. I don't know how much traffic goes through Crescent City on up to Brookings, but I suspect there is some.
Oh, I don't know even exactly what our traffic pattern is every day, but whatever it is, I'll bet you there's 40 or 50% of them go right on through.
And actually service points north.
Right.
Because most of that product is coming from the Bay Area and then dropping things off. I mean, I worked at Ocean World for 25 years, and most of the truck traffic that serviced us, and I'm talking about semis with our refrigerated product, were also going further north.
Yeah.
And they were dropping stuff off in various small communities as they went all the way, up to the Oregon-Washington border.
Right. And so I like I say, it's probably a larger number than we really realize. I know for us, we get our food from Sacramento. For our federal food comes from the distributor in Sacramento. And so they come up and come over $2.99 because they're not licensed to go out of California.
I see.
So if they had to do that, they'd have to go 40 miles further up and then come back $1.99. And so...
Which they wouldn't be licensed for.
Well, they would have to go out and be special licensed and so forth. And then I'm not sure how that would work on an emergency basis, but I'm sure that could be worked around. But that's just for us. That's, and then they've got to go back home. So we really need to have that done. And those are the kind of facts that we need to be taking. And I don't know that they're being taken to Caltrans or to our congressman's office. I haven't seen them, so I can't tell you that we're doing it or we're not doing it. But that's the kind of things we need to be looking at.
Well, I mean, the thing, when you think of it, in terms of the whole transportation with respect to coming into Del Norte County, 199 is not, I mean, it doesn't, it's been closed many times since I've been in the county due to landfall, rock falls. The road going north, we had that huge sinkhole occur. I know there's issues with the road north of Brookings with regards to ground shift and things of that nature.
Right.
And then you couple that with the unstable situation at Last Chance Grade.
We would be unheard if Last Chance Grade went down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there is no way to get around it. I've heard people say, oh, well, there's a road that they could put in and have it ready to go in 6 months. Well, 6 months, you might as well turn out the lights in Del Norte County. I mean, yeah, there's going to be some coming down 199. We'd have to change where we buy our, groceries, where Safeway would get their groceries, those types of things. But it would be a devastating loss to Del Norte County.
Do you see any way that that there's going to be any real serious progress made on 101 anytime in the near future? Are you optimistic there, or?
Not optimistically. Yeah, the only optimistically thing that I can say is when Senator McGuire made the announcement at the Economic Summit that he had secured funds to get the environmental impact study started. That's the only thing. But I think you brought something up a while ago, and I think is that our supervisors need to be working hand in hand on not just a 2x2 or a couple supervisors, but on a 5x5, working with Humboldt County supervisors on getting pressure put on. Because I just don't see it happening right now. And I think it takes both counties, and that would include Curry County.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there needs to be something along the lines of a big, a convention or a group put together where we have, and I don't know how that works with the Brown Act, but, well, it just has to be publicized, that's all. But
well, the thing about it is,
meet in one of these, the Tolowa or Yurok, they have big areas to have meetings, and have a meeting with the representatives from Curry County, representatives from Delaware County, and representatives from Humboldt, and our state legislators and our congressmen.
The thing about it is, though, we have a couple of resources in CSAC and rural counties in which our representative is, Jerry Hemmingson. And in all of the time that Jerry Hemmingson has represented us down there, we've got nothing out of it.
We get nothing here. Why would you think he would do it there?
So if some effort was made to go to rural counties and put that issue as an urgent issue before them on a regular basis, instead of once in a blue moon, if, for instance, we were to stir up whatever lobbyist we got in Washington, D.C. to put some pressure there. I mean, it seemed like this would be almost a daily sort of effort in Del Norte County to increase the pace of this whole project. But there seems to be this we'll just kind of sit on our hands and wait for someone else to give us this magic solution for our problem.
It's not proactive.
No proactive.
We are not proactive in this county, and we need people on there that want to be proactive.
Yeah.
And you've got to. They wanted me to run for supervisor against Jerry 4 years ago. Now we were in the middle of, putting the harbor back together, and I just didn't feel it was time. And I said back then, how do you beat somebody that doesn't do anything wrong and doesn't do anything right? And it's a tough battle. To be able to, but it's done. It has been done because you have two, in a sense, pretty new supervisors, being Roger Gitlin and Bob Berkowitz. That's a start. I think when people put Lori Cowan in, they thought that there was going to be a change, and she just fell right in with the other two. So.
Well, I think the mistake they made, too, was assuming that the vote was for Lori Cowan rather than against Martha McClure.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what was going on there. I mean, too often somebody does something wrong in this county in which that happened to be Martha's turn.
Right.
And it bit her. And as a result, when the election came up, and it was close enough to the election that it affected her ability to be a viable candidate. And she lost,
yeah.
And lost rather handily. And also that coupled with the fact that the county board of supervisors has been sitting on their hands for 25 years. And you can't sit on your hands for 25 years without the electorate at least getting some kind of an idea that that's what's happening. And I don't know whether that's going to extend over into this election, but when you say that you're running against somebody that doesn't do anything wrong, but yet doesn't do anything right, that's a pretty tough nut to crack.
It is. And, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate that we have three challengers. Whether it had been just one other person challenging or not. I don't know what the results would have been. Was asked yesterday probably 15, 20 times, well, how do I see the election going? And, I can either win outright, or I can, keep Jerry from getting a 50%, or I can lose. I mean, that's, so that's what I have to look at. But I'm hoping that when the voters look at what the challengers have and what Jerry's been doing, that they see that they need to be able to make a change. One of the things I'm hoping that changes people's minds is the marijuana, the cannabis. That, to me, was done absolutely wrong. And that I thought they did a great job in putting a committee together. That wasn't wrong at all. But they didn't give them any guidance. Now, they could have had their county council look at, I don't care, Humboldt or whoever, and say, okay, these are the things we're looking at. How can we make it better? How can we adapt it to Del Norte County, and then give that to the committee? And they could have done that a year ago, and we wouldn't be here fighting at it now. So,
well, I mean, we're not the only county in the state of California that's having an issue with cannabis. I mean, I think that current count, there's 39 or 40 of the 58 counties that have bans right now in place, right, because they haven't been able to come up with any kind of an ordinance that's going to solve the overall problem. Because quite frankly, the data for how cannabis affects a rural population is pretty meager. I mean, cannabis has been illegal for so long as a recreational drug that a lot of the kinds of issues that could crop up once it's legalized as a recreational drug haven't been public knowledge, because no one is going to admit to having a problem with cannabis if it's an illegal drug.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the closest we've got is Colorado.
Well, Colorado's had all sorts of issues, and they've swept. I mean, a lot of the pro-cannabis camp has swept a lot of those issues under the rug, right, because they don't want them made public. But the problems continue to exist in Colorado with their recreational marijuana, and they haven't solved very many of them. They can't even tell for sure how effective their law enforcement practices are for people who drive under the influence, whether it affects them dramatically, whether it doesn't.
And that's. I lived in Reno when a young lady had smoked marijuana, and she admitted that she had smoked it 2 days before and ran a red light and killed a policeman. And, they got her as being on a high on drug because it was still in her system. And I don't know that her case has ever been appealed, but she went to prison.
Yeah.
And so you look at some of the stats, and they'll tell you, well, nobody's hasn't killed anybody from marijuana, and I don't know that that's true. Because it's still illegal by a federal standpoint, and you could argue the other, the state wanting to or approving it, the people in the state approving it. But one of the things that I said, and I would hold true to, is that whatever comes out, I would never vote for anything if it was anywhere near 199, 197, or 101. If you drive across 199 going to Grants Pass at the right time, if you're not high by the time you get to the other side, you don't have a smell. You don't have a smeller.
My son says, hold your breath when you pass any property with real tall fences along the road.
It's like I said I referred it to being in a West Hollywood nightclub. I went to a party one time in West Hollywood, and and everybody was smoking pot back then. You know, this was back in the, I think it was in the early '80s, and I remember leaving there and thinking, I had a Porsche at the time, and I'm driving down the freeway thinking I'm speeding, and I looked down and I was doing 35 miles an hour, and I hadn't even smoked it, you know. It was just being in the room, and so I had something to drink, but the point being is, I don't want our visitors coming through here, you know, smelling pot growing.
Well,
and so
one of the problems Colorado had when they instigated having recreational marijuana legal was that people would fly for marijuana vacations to Colorado in order to imbibe, and then the rental car companies had an awful time because when they dropped their cars off at the the airport to fly home, why very often there'd be the remains of their vacation in the trunk of the car.
Well, I was going to say that, or either the smell of it, you know, that you can't get out. So.
It's humorous, but
yeah.
I mean, I look at marijuana from the standpoint of if we have a lot of prescription drugs, we have alcohol, we have a lot of things that alter how you behave and act and your perception and your motor skills and things of that nature. And if it's handled responsibly, nobody should have a problem with it. But too often in today's society, it's not handled properly. And what it does, cannabis, unless the ordinance is somewhat sensible and somewhat cogently thought out, it provides yet another avenue for a person that tends to be irresponsible to do great harm. And from that standpoint, I have a real reluctance with the concept of recreational marijuana. I'm not totally opposed to it, but I think that that should be a part of the whole thought process when you're approaching ordinances and how you're going to handle marijuana in Del Norte County.
Right.
And, the working group is fine, but at what point do you get beyond just the nuts and bolts financial aspect of it, how big, how far, how this, that, and the other thing, before you still have to inject in this notoriously unreasonable and irrational element that is of being humans with a controlled substance.
Well,
with regard to
I look at it this way: you're not going to know those answers until you put some kind of an ordinance together and start delving into the problems you just brought up.
Yeah.
And that can be done through public hearing.
Well, not only that, you needed to start the issue. I mean, you need to start the whole process a year ago or more than a year ago.
Right. We knew it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And,
no surprise.
And, to say, well, I'm not going to vote for it, or I'm going to abstain, or whatever reason he gives for not doing something, that he doesn't want it to look bad. I know what he's trying to do is to get past the election.
Right.
And so he's going to stall until such time. Both of them are going to stall until such time as the election's over with, and then they might delve into it again. But
well, it would seem
we've
like
killed a year.
It would seem like, since it's my understanding that the pro vote for recreational marijuana passed, it was 60 some odd percent to 30 some odd percent. So what danger is it for two incumbents to take a stand one way or another? They're not going to. Or is it just the fear of losing a few votes here and there from their stance, or what? What's going on there?
Well,
Why?
I think it's not having the support of their people that support them. There's people out there that support both of them who are dead against it, whether the people voted for it or not. And so, as long as they can keep stalling. And putting the blame on the working group. I remember I wasn't in the in the building at the time, but I watched it on YouTube. And is his name Jeff, the one that's
Jesse Davis?
Yeah, Jesse. He, was kind of hinting that they weren't sure just exactly what they were supposed to be bringing to the supervisors. And him, Jerry said, "Well, do you want us to tell you what to do?" Well,
yeah,
kinda. That would have been my answer. Yes, I want to know. So, we've just this is not another thing that bothers me is a lot of people in District 4 are on wells, and we've already had one incident out there off of Vipon where a guy had a grow and people were out of water for as much as 6 weeks, and brought a lot of sand up. Went into their system and had to have plumbers coming in and repairing their plumbing system. And so that's another issue that we've got to watch is where these things are, because it takes so much water to grow the plants. So that's another issue that I have not heard anybody talk about. But
well, I've had Jesse Davis on this program, and I brought up the concept of water usage with him, and his claim was that medical marijuana, when it was being grown in California since, I guess, 1996, that the issue with water wasn't an issue, that marijuana doesn't require a whole lot of water. But, that's a lot of the smoke and mirrors that the cannabis, pro-cannabis people throw out there to disguise the fact that there are issues with growing marijuana.
Right.
I don't see there being a real problem with growing marijuana in Del Norte County if, it's kept within reasonable limits.
Well, again, what is a reasonable limit?
Yeah.
If you're growing in an area where, everybody there is drawing off of the same water system,
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, how do you prove to me that that your well will support, let's say 10 plants, and you're not going to damage everybody else's well? And so that's a real problem in my mind. I have 2 pieces of property. I have 2 wells, and if I wanted to go, that'd be one thing I'd be looking at is how does my well on one lot affect the well on the other lot, So, and then you got to talk about the chemicals that's going to be, washed through the plant and then into the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it's a farming product,
right? And
you have to treat it as such, a plant, so you have to protect it and do all the sorts of things that.
So there's a lot of issues that have to be corrected.
Precisely, and do you think this is going to be something that's going to be solved before the end of the year? Because pretty clearly there's a deadline as to when the county has to come up with some sort of a viable ordinance.
To be honest with you, I don't think it will be.
Are we going to be under a ban then, you think, into the new year? And that's
Yeah.
primarily because the Board of Supervisors in its current form, they don't have their act together.
They can't work together.
Yeah.
I mean, you have 2 on one side, 3 on the other, depending on who the supervisor is going to be. It might be 3 on one side and now 2 on the other, and that's why I'm running, because I can listen to all sides. I'm not, and I've told Bob and Roger both, there's going to be times when I don't agree with you.
Yeah.
And, but I'm my own person. I didn't take anybody's money. I'm running my campaign off of my own dollars, and because I don't want to be obligated to anybody. And so if I'm sitting there, I'm going to listen to both sides, and I'm going to make a reasonable decision. The only time in 11 years that I've been on the Harbor Commission I ever abstained was when I wasn't there, and I couldn't vote on it because, I hadn't participated.
with that, let me take another quick
Sure.
break. This is KFUG 101.1 on your FM dial. You've been listening to Conversations with Sam, which typically goes from 3 to 4 on Sunday afternoons, every Sunday afternoon. Today, we've extended today's broadcast because we have in the studio the delightful Mr. Ron Phillips, candidate for District 4 Supervisor, talking about his vision for Del Norte County. We've touched on just pretty much all of the hot button issues in the county over the past hour and a half, and we're slogging towards the finish line at 5 o'clock, but we haven't been through everything that we need to talk about. So with that, I'm going to put Mr. Phillips on the spot and ask him what he sees in the future for Del Norte County. Where do you think the county needs to go?
I think what we need to really look at is that we need to encourage business. We need an economic driver, that we can build a good, solid economic foundation here. We have a new airline. Hopefully, we could entice some people that fly stuff out of here that would come to town now, and it goes south, so it would go into Oakland, and that would be a good transfer point there. I would like to see us expand the college. There's right now you're limited in what you can take and what kind of even an AA you can get. I have a person that works for me, and I think she's got about 5 different degrees now because she just keeps going to school and she gets the basics out of the way, and now she's only taking classes that require 16 units of classwork in that particular field. And so I think we need to be able to expand the college to have more diverse course curriculum. Now, it might be that we have to do away with the tie with Humboldt and bring in another type of a college here and get that going. There's also, of course, we always have to talk about the visitor coming to look at the redwoods and our ocean line, ocean view. Those are topics that my wife has a Airbnb, and probably 90% of the people that come here are coming to see the redwoods. And so we still always have to be out, talking to people, advertising that. My question the other day to somebody was, are we still working with going to countries outside of the United States? Do we have money or funds going to that? And I was told that there's a little bit. We belong to an organization that does that. Our chamber does, not our chamber, our Visitors Bureau. The chamber is to keep them here. The Visitors Bureau is to get them here. So we need to do that. But we need, of course, to have a road that you can get here on. And that's going to be the hot topic for the next 4 years, is getting through that process of at least identifying a road, getting the environmental assessment done on it, and then look for the funding to get it built. So,
say you were an international tourist and you came to the United States, and you were to fly into some place here, logically it would be San Francisco, SFO, rather than Oakland. How would you, get somebody who doesn't have a car that wants to fly into our airport to recognize the fact that they're going to have to go on over to Oakland to fly up here?
Well, I think most people that are flying in, they know how to book, to get to the place. I know when we fly out of here, we normally go to Portland and fly out of Portland, even when the other airline was here, because the fare was, for 2 of us, was more than what it would take to drive up to Portland, spend the night, leave our car at the hotel, and fly out for a week or 10 days, and then fly back, get our car, and drive home. By the time you go in and check in over there and make the flight up to Portland and then, make the change, we could almost drive it. It's 5-6 hours to drive up there at a reasonable speed. So, but I think people that were going to fly in from, let's say, Tokyo or wherever, they would know that they either, if they couldn't fly directly into Oakland, to be able to find a way to get over.
I mean, most of the international visitors that I saw when I worked at Ocean World, typically they drove up here, or they rented an RV and they drove up here.
And we still see that.
But I mean, it seemed like the numbers were relatively small. My wife and I have had the opportunity to fly to many places over in Europe, and we've talked to quite a few people while we were over there. And when they find out you're from America, and they think that they have this vision of, being this spectacularly beautiful place, and they want to come, and they think they can, get in a car out of JFK, and in 2 weeks they can see the entire country. That's the perception a lot of people in Europe have of America. They don't realize how big it is.
So we have people that say, well, we'll be right up. And I will say, well, where are you at? Oh, well, we're in Mendocino, or we're in Santa Rosa. And they don't realize it's another 300 miles.
Yeah. I mean, that's precisely my point. People, at least on an international scale, don't realize just how big this country is, and that if you get, say, to San Francisco, the idea that in the brief period of time you're going to be able to come up and see the redwoods, that doesn't seem to be, you really have to make that a fairly important thing for international people to have on their radar, so to speak, or even people that are citizens of the United States or Canada or Mexico. And I don't know how much effort has been made, but right now our tourist industry, just in our 3 to 5 months that we have of decent weather, is probably the biggest moneymaker we have here locally.
Right.
And, if it is the biggest moneymaker, how do we make that bigger and better?
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to put more concentrated effort, and that could be financially from all three agencies, the city, the county, and the harbor, and increasing the amount of money that's put in there. But when we lived in Mammoth, we had people that would fly into Las Vegas from out of the country, fly in there, get a car, go through Death Valley, through Yosemite, and then, or through Mammoth, and then into Yosemite, and then back to Las Vegas to fly out, or even Phoenix was another hot spot. And so it's doable, and people will take the time to do it. They really enjoy the redwoods. I can't believe how much people enjoy coming and just seeing the redwoods. To me, a redwood tree is a redwood tree, but it's kind of like, when I first moved here, we went and walked on the beach every day. Well, and I don't think we've walked on the beach 5 times in the last 6 years. It's there, I just don't go and do it. So, but I think that we need to keep pushing that redwood to the sea. I was very skeptical for many years until we actually got into business, and we know now that the people that we get here, 90% of them are coming to see the redwoods.
Yeah. And
so we need to be publicizing that. I think we need to be taking it under our own privy, to actually make sure that's being done. I don't know. I'm not on the chamber. Well, I'm not the harbor's representatives of the chamber anymore, or the Visitors Bureau, so I don't know exactly what all is being done.
It seems like, I don't know, I mean, a little story. When my daughter married a country boy from North Carolina, when she was back there, she's currently a lieutenant commander in the Navy, and the first time she brought the future son-in-law back, why, they flew into Portland and then they got a rental car and drove down here, and my son-in-law is not driving. He's crouched, nose pressed against the window, looking for the redwoods. Yeah. And as they're driving through Jedediah Smith and coming up the hill to come over into the Crescent City Bowl, he's still looking for redwoods.
Yeah.
And you know, it just seems like that they're here. We kind of take them for granted, but they're a real marketing tool for Del Norte County.
Right.
Because, you know, it's like you say, 90% of the people that come here are looking for their first view of the redwoods. And I don't know, once you get away from this little corner, or even, you know, further south where there are more redwoods, it just seems like the whole advertising campaign, so to speak, kind of just dissipates. And I don't know whether that means anything or not, but when we would go abroad and they'd ask us where we were from, we would say Crescent City, California, and of course the automatic assumption was that we were from somewhere down around San Francisco or down around LA. Right. And when we describe what we're talking about here, and we're talking about a lot of people that are in the tourist industry and are fairly knowledgeable about the United States, but having a clue as to what Crescent City is and what the area is like and how beautiful and wonderful it is here. How do you break through and get that recognition on a much wider scale? What kind of mechanisms are there for, to kind of help that along?
Well, I think a lot of it too is that we are so far removed from everything that in a sense that if you're coming from wherever, you're looking at 300 miles to get here. And so what we need to do is to make it more enticable to come here. We need to highlight the redwoods, but then we need other items. We need to be talking about the backpacking and the fishing industry. You don't hear a lot about that anymore. At least I don't. So if you're a fisherman, you know about it. But if you're just somebody who, we just had a guest that was here. Her husband didn't want to come. She was from Pennsylvania. She made the trip out. She was born here, hadn't been here since she was 3 years old. And she wanted to come and, do some research about, what did she leave and what's transpired. And her husband wouldn't come because he likes to fish. Well, there's a lot of fishing between here and Pennsylvania, and if she would have or somebody would have told her about, the fishing on the Smith River, or the Klamath River, he might have joined her and got in the car and come with her. But, so
didn't happen.
It didn't happen, and so we need to be talking about other things as we talk about the redwoods. We need a joint effort where we're talking about, the redwoods is here, but now fishing is here. We had a couple other day that stayed here, young couple. They went horseback riding out up in the mountains from our local group that puts on horseback riding. And they just loved it. They said they enjoyed every bit of it. That if they hadn't just stumbled onto it, they wouldn't have known about it, and then they wouldn't have had that experience that they had. So I just think that we're not doing a good job. We think we're doing a good job, but there's more things to do here than what we're highlighting.
Yeah, I mean,
And as a supervisor, that's one of the things you need to be doing. You need to be attuned to that. I know Roger sits, I believe, on the chamber, and I think Bob might sit on the visitors bureau, or it could be reversed. I'm not sure, but you don't see the other two involved in it.
Yeah, well, the other two have much more important things to occupy their time, and I'm not sure that the overall approval is there. They prefer actually to take vacations in foreign parts as opposed to spending their vacation time here in Del Norte County.
Well, I sure do. I'm not that kind of a supervisor. I wouldn't be that kind of a supervisor. You know, I take it very seriously. I know a lot of people that I've spoke to in District 4. Jerry has not responded to them in whatever their question was. If he did, it was an attitude that like he was mad because they had even inconvenienced him, you know, in that. And so I went out, and I've had the little flip phone, you know, for many years, but I went out and got a smartphone. Well, smarter than me anyway. You know, so that people could get a hold of me, and if I'm elected, you know, I'll respond to them, you know, as quick as I can get to them. So.
I never had a problem getting a hold of Jerry. It's just my problem was getting, you know, any kind of a sense that he really cared about anything
that's
that
kind of
I
what I'm trying to say.
had to say.
Yeah.
I mean, it was more like I had an issue with the city one time, and it was, you know, fairly trivial matter, but it was. You know, it's an issue for the city. I'm sorry, I can't do anything. Let me know how it all turns out. Mm-hmm. And I mean that seemed to me to be the prevailing attitude, not only with Jerry, but you know, quite a number of people that currently sit on the board and that previously sat on the board for a number of years. It was we're Sacramento's orphan. We have no power in Sacramento. We're a poor county. You know, just this litany of excuses for why, you know, nothing was being done. Back in the 90s, I believe it was Martha McClure was trumpeting her little cottage businesses that she intended to have develop here in Del Norte County to supplement the loss of all of the resource-based industries, the logging, the mining, you know, and what have you. And, you know, it's fine for her to talk about them. It seems that being a representative now is all about talking about something, but yet, you know, there's no product. It's almost like that old advertisement, where's the beef?
Yeah.
And
well, and I think you're right. I think that's what's happened is, again, people get into the office, you know, and they're gung-ho the first 4 years. They get reelected. Nobody challenges them. And then all of a sudden, they phone it in a sense. You know, they pick up their packet, and that's it. Or they go to the meetings they've been assigned to go to the meetings, and all of a sudden now they're too busy or to carry on and keep things moving. You know, I had heard of Martha's cottages. You know, I thought it was a great idea. Well, but like you said, nothing ever happened. It was talk. She wanted to have at the college a commissary where people who could go in there and if they made jams or jellies or dried beef or whatever it was that, you know, that they could start a little cottage business coming to the market, and so they would have that advantage. Well, they took a lot of money, made a big survey, and where'd it go? Still hasn't happened.
Disappeared.
You know, so you know, Dave was set with us. We started, like I told you, we set with the 5 of us had got together and wanted to do something for veterans. And then all of a sudden there were other people that wanted to be interested in it. And Dave was, you know, the guy that put it all together, Dave Finnegan. And then when he was defeated, all of a sudden nobody wanted to do it anymore. So it's, you know, the county and the city said, oh yeah, we're still meeting together, you know, we're going to do this. Nothing ever has happened, you know, and it's the 2 supervisors who, one that's up for election and the other one that doesn't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so often I just want to shake my head at the just the flat inability to elect people that you know, are somehow meaningful to this county, that somehow have some aspect of leadership, that somehow have some, you know, idea of being positive, being upbeat about, you know, where this county's going. They seem to be comfortable with the fact that, you know, we're losing population. Our economic picture is pretty grim. I mean, I have 3 adult children that none of them could stay in Del Norte County because, I mean, they wanted to do something with their lives. Right. And unless you work for, you know, one of the various public agencies here in town, the school district, county, city government, or the state, yeah, or out at the prison, I mean, there's no avenue for any kind of just, you know, becoming a successful plumber or a successful electrician or a contractor or whatever. I mean, not everybody wants to be a college-educated hero. Some are satisfied with making a comfortable living, doing, you know, the kind of the grunt work that puts together a society. And I think that's all evaporated over the last 40 years or so here in Del Norte County, to the point where anybody with a little get up and go gets up and goes.
Right.
And,
well, you know, I know a lot of it has been the economic downturn, you know, as far as building goes. We're starting to see that change a little bit, but I don't know when's the last time you called a plumber, but you almost have to take a loan on your house anymore if you're going to have anything more than a pipe changed. You know, so plumbers make, well, a lot of money. They don't have to have a college education. You know, carpenters make good money. You know, so there's business here that can be done, you know, with just a little bit of initiative to get out. I think we're about ready to close, aren't we?
Yep, we're getting ready to close. You've got about the next 4 minutes to wrap it up.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things that I really, you kind of touched on it a bit just a minute ago, and that's the voters not getting out and looking at the issues and knowing what's going on in the county. They go about their business wherever they work, or if they're retired, you know, whatever they do, and they don't realize what's happening in the county. Unfortunately, Jerry's name's going to be on the top of the ballot, or is on the top of the ballot, and statistics show that over 60% of the people at the top of the ballot are elected. And it's just people say, oh, okay, that's, you know. And
first one on the list.
Right. Just vote for the first one on the list. Unfortunately, I'm the last one on the list. So they really got to go down to get to me. But, you know, I have a good name in town. I do a lot of work here in town. I've sat on a number of boards here in town. You know, and so I've been very active in the 12, 15 years I've been here, and so people know who I am either through the harbor or through the Santa's workshop or through something at RHS, the farmers market. So I'm hoping that they'll take that into consideration when they do go to vote, and not just vote for the incumbent because, well, he's there, you know.
Well, with that, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure being here. I wasn't sure I could talk for 2 hours.
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't take much to get you going.
I'm sorry Roger didn't get here.
I'm really appreciative of the fact that I see the energy, I see the optimism, and I see the fact that you haven't written Del Norte County off like the incumbent pretty clearly has. He may have lived here for a number of years. He may be one of the good old boys, but pretty clearly his multi-million-dollar investment portfolio is more important than doing good work for the county. That's one thing that I did note when they were publishing the current remunerations for the county supervisors. We're paying this man nearly $90,000 a year to do what? So in the last few seconds of the program, I'd like to encourage you to get out on Tuesday morning and vote. June 5th, that's Tuesday, all day at your local polling place. And please take time to vote wisely. Look at the candidates before you mark the big X by their name. I want to thank Mr. Phillips for inflicting my radio skills upon him this afternoon, and
Well, it's been a pleasure, let me tell you.
We'll wish you good luck on Tuesday, and with that,
let's don't make it the last time we talk.
We certainly have a standing invitation for all of our guests, so we'll wish you well, and with that, we're going to go back to our regularly scheduled program.